Welcome to another episode of Aging to Perfection, where we talk about all the issues with aging, but hopefully with a little bit of humor, but definitely with a lot of information. Today, I have with me Jacqueline Williams Love, who is a breast cancer survivor. This episode is going to be called Check Yourself, Early Detection and Making Sure That You Know What You're Looking For. So, Jacqueline, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this topic. I've had so many friends over the pandemic that are my age. I still think I'm young, 43, so I'm in the thick of all the aging fun things. But it just seems like people are getting breast cancer earlier, or maybe it's detecting it earlier. So I would love to hear your story and what you went through and, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah. So breast cancer runs in my family.
Okay.
Started with my great-grandfather, my grandmother, and then I was diagnosed in May of 2022. So from an early age, I was always taught to do self-checks. And that was, my mom had always taught me, like, I've always just done that. So Thanksgiving of 2021, I found a lump. Called the doctor right away because I was like, we're not waiting on this. We did a mammogram and an ultrasound. They told me it was a benign cyst. So I was like, I went out that night, celebrated with my friends.
Right. That's what you do the day before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Right?
We're like, sweet. Cancer. No cancer.
No cancer. Yeah.
So then as the months kind of progressed, the lump grew. And I was like, oh, this is not right. If it was a cyst or a benign cyst, those don't grow.
Right.
So then I called my doctor again. We had it checked and they mammogrammed and ultrasounded again. They're like, this looks questionable. And I was like, cool.
Yeah.
We had it biopsied, and 2 months before our wedding, we found out I had invasive ductal cancer.
Oh my gosh.
And by that point, it had moved and spread to my lymph nodes. So I did a lumpectomy in June of 2022, and then started chemo 2 days after my wedding in July.
I know. I am good friends with your husband, and so I follow you both on, both of you on Facebook, but now I'll follow you after this.
Yes.
But, I mean, and my girlfriend Carrie works with your husband too, and I remember just hearing those stories and being like, you've got to be kidding me. And we talked about this. There's never a good time to get cancer, but my goodness, like before your wedding.
Yeah. It was insane.
Yeah. So how did that all, one of the things that I like to talk about with my members who are 50 plus with AARP, and like I said, this podcast is so important because a lot of the issues that we talk about with our older members are still really relevant to our younger members. And being your own advocate and making sure that if you feel something is wrong, to keep going to those doctors. And it sounds like that's what you did with your lump.
And that's one thing I've always told after I was diagnosed, I told friends, everyone, like, if you feel something, you have to say something and you have to be your advocate because no one else is going to advocate for you unless you do it for yourself.
Right.
And people, like, after friends had found out, they're like, oh, like, I feel a lump or I've noticed something. I'm like, you have to go to the doctor.
Absolutely. And I've been hearing lately on the news that they don't necessarily want you to do your own tests. And I've been kind of surprised by that because you kind of know your own tatas, right? I mean, you know what's going on.
Yeah.
So even if you're just in the shower really quick, I don't understand why they're not just having people do that still.
I don't either. And I'm part of a young survivors support group. It started off with breast cancer, but we've now moved it to all cancers just because there's so many young survivors. And I think pretty much every single one of us we have found our lumps.
Really?
And it's like you have to check because at a young age, your breasts are so dense that mammograms aren't finding it.
Right.
And unless you have a history of breast cancer, which I do because I have between my grandfather and my grandmother, and then my family has a genetic breast cancer gene. So because of that, I was able to then get the MRIs.
Okay.
But I wasn't able to start that until after I was diagnosed.
So what gene do you have?
So I have the PELB2.
Okay.
Which is sort of like BRCA from what I've read. It's just not as common as BRCA, and I don't think it hits as hard. But it runs, where BRCA I think runs, most people have like a 50 to 80% chance of getting breast cancer.
Yeah.
Ours is a 20 to 60%, I think. And my family actually runs on the high end. Pretty much every single female on my mom's side of the family has either has the gene or has had breast cancer.
I had a girlfriend growing up, and same thing. Her mother, all of her sisters had breast cancer. And so, God bless her, she went to U of M and did genetic studies, and really that was a passion of hers. But talk to me about your grandfather. So your grandfather had breast cancer, and people kind of forget the men in this situation as well.
Yeah, so actually it was my great-grandfather, and he found it from watching an episode of Oprah.
Stop. Yeah. God bless him.
It was like an episode, I think it was on men's breast cancer, and he was like, I have those things.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that's how he found out. Yeah, and then he survived.
Awesome.
Lived to like 90-something.
Of course,
and then my grandmother got it when she was in her 60s or 70s, and then I was diagnosed, and then a year after I was, my mother was diagnosed.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm a 4th generation breast cancer survivor.
So your mother got it after you.
Yeah.
Were you like the impetus for her? I know she was very an advocate to test.
She knew that she had the gene.
Okay.
And before I was diagnosed, she was monitoring every 6 months between MRIs and mammograms. And then I was diagnosed. And so when I was diagnosed, she was like, okay. She had started talking to her doctors about the preventative, like what she needed to do, because mine is estrogen driven.
Okay.
So she was talking about, okay, do we need to stop estrogen stuff? Like what needs to happen? And then almost a year later, she was diagnosed.
Yeah, and that's what's so scary. So we did in my pause era on a previous 2 episodes on peri and menopause, and I talked to the doctor about that too, just the concerns of different therapies and the concern of that increasing your risk of having, cancers and those kind of things. And she said the new therapies are really they're not seeing that happening as much.
Which is good.
But if you have the certain kind of cancer, they're also different, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I mean,
every treatment's different. Every gene is different.
Yeah.
And like what the recommendations and everything is so different.
So what was treatment like for you?
So I did both. I did chemo and radiation.
Okay.
Which when you're diagnosed with cancer, or even just before when you hear cancer, like one thing that people don't talk about is fertility.
Yeah.
And since I was estrogen positive and progesterone positive, they put me in menopause. So I'm in menopause
You're in your pause era.
Yeah.
Look at you.
37 years old. I'm like, yes.
Right.
So my mom and I were, going through menopause together.
And chemo, it sounds like, right?
She was lucky enough and did not have to do chemo.
Good.
So they caught hers super early. So she just did the bilateral mastectomy with reconstruction, where I just did the lumpectomy, which I'm still in the debate about whether or not I'm going to do the bilateral, which I'm leaning towards a yes.
Okay.
Just trying to figure out when.
Right.
Because, life keeps moving.
And it's not really a fun surgery, right?
No.
So you went through, egg retrieval and all that.
Yeah. So now I'm in the process of, I'm on maintenance medicine.
Okay.
Which I'll be on for the next 10-ish years.
Okay.
So yay. But we're
thank God we have that, right? I mean, I know it's such a terrible thing, but they're just coming out with so many new therapies and medicines.
Which is great because, with the medicine I'm on, it cuts my chances of having cancer again by like half.
Oh my gosh.
I'll take
any cancers, or is it just the breast cancer?
For breast,
okay.
Yeah. So I'll take that.
Yeah.
And it, helps save some of that time and decisions of when I'm going to do the bilateral.
Awesome.
But I'll be done with one of my medicines in May.
Okay.
And so hopefully then we'll be able to look at starting our family.
Oh, good.
Yeah. But it was when I was diagnosed, so we were 2 months out from my wedding.
Right.
We had to do IVF before. So our egg retrieval was a week before our wedding.
Talk about having to have really frank conversations really early on.
Oh, yeah.
Like that. Like, I'm sure you and Nate talk about everything now. Like, it's game over.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's nothing that we can't talk about.
No. Yeah. We planned our marriage, our divorce, and our death all before we got married.
Well, there you go. The new prenup, right?
Yes, I was like, wow, we really don't need anything. Here we go.
So 2 weeks before the wedding, you did your egg retrieval.
Yeah.
Fun.
Oh, yeah. So my hormones I was a roller coaster of emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you guys waited for a little bit to do your official honeymoon, right?
Yeah. So we waited. We did our honeymoon a year later.
Yeah.
So it was like right after I had finished chemo and radiation and everything. So it was a great celebration of like all of it being done.
Yeah. And are you concerned about starting your family, about a reoccurrence, or have the doctors talked about that or what that looks like?
I am nervous about it just because I mean, when you're pregnant, they want to put me on more estrogen. And I'm like, whoa, let's back that one up.
Right.
Because of, mine is estrogen driven. And then being off my medicine, I'm like, don't know how I feel about it.
Right.
But I mean, studies have shown that because the medicine that I'm currently on, like really, if you're on it for the 2 years, there's great studies for the reoccurrence being cut so low that, there's hope that it won't come back.
Yeah.
Which makes me feel a bit better about, having and starting a family.
Absolutely. And there's, they're always coming out with new things. I was listening to Good Morning America this morning. That's my daily show of choice. And don't hate me if you're the other one.
Oh, no.
But
I float between the two.
Yes. But they were talking today about a new vaccine for breast cancer.
Yes.
That's not going to be really available anytime soon, but they've shown some really positive results from it already. Have your support group talked about this, or do you know of it?
I've read a little bit about it. We haven't talked about it yet, but I'm really curious about what it is and if it is, a legit or viable thing.
Right. I mean, it's so interesting. I know the reason I love this topic so much is because I just think that early detection is so important. And the unfortunate thing is that you did that.
Yes.
And then you were thinking, this is great, everything's fine. But had you not, like I said before, been your own advocate, where would you be? And that's the scary thought, right?
Yeah.
My mom died of endometrial cancer about 7 years ago. And so I went and got the genetic testing done. I was not qualified to have my insurance pay for it because I didn't have any of the, my dad's mom had breast cancer and passed from it. I didn't have a direct link that was on my mother's side. And so that really ticks you in a different category for insurance to pay for it. So so I just went and paid for it myself. And I'm not saying everybody is able to do this, but I'm pretty sure it was about $250.
Yeah.
And I was like done and done. I for sure thought I was going to have endometrial targets that were just through the roof and no other cancers but breast cancers. I was off the charts for it and it's crazy. And so much like you, every 6 months I have some type of scan done. So today I had my mammogram done.
Hey.
Sat flat for an hour with a contrast, but I kept thinking the whole time, like, when is this going to be over? This is so annoying. But you know what's more annoying? Sitting in a chemo chair.
1,000%.
Yeah.
And what was hard when I went through chemo was it was during the hospital still under chemo or COVID protocols. So Nate couldn't go with me. So no one could be in the room with me. And that was one of the scariest things because
I can't imagine.
You're sitting there not knowing what's happening. You're being pumped with all this medicine.
Don't feel good.
You don't feel good. I was lucky enough that I never really got sick during chemo. So
good.
I was able to work the entire time. Oh my gosh. Yeah. The only days I took off from school was chemo days.
Yeah.
Which was really good because, school and
right.
it's hard to take days off.
Right.
But I had lesson plans and I had a sub. My school that I work for was fabulous. They had someone on call at any moment I needed it. That person was on call to be able to come sub for me, which was great.
And that's such a good point to it, as well as having that support system to have you, whether it's your colleagues or your employer, husbands, sisters, wives, whatever it may be, just having that support system. And I have another girlfriend who got diagnosed early with breast cancer, and she talks a lot about survivor's guilt and survivor caregivers and how her family just really scooped her up and loved her and just took care of her. And I'm sure you've had that network as well.
Yeah. I mean, between my husband and then my family, between my siblings, my parents, and then just having so many people in my family have cancer.
Right.
Like, they were all there for me. And my friends, like, I couldn't have done it without everyone. And that's one thing I think that got me through everything was all the thoughts and the prayers. Like, I was a true believer of that power.
Yeah.
Because I was able to keep my positivity because I knew everyone was behind me.
Absolutely.
And supported me.
Absolutely.
And that's huge. And I feel like when we talk about survivorship is like making sure you have that support group and that group of people that you can go to, whether it's your family or friends or a support group.
And Can you talk about that support group or what the name of it is? I don't know if you're allowed to share it, but I think if listeners are going through this or they have a loved one that's going through it, I think they would like to, share those best practices or just the heartache that goes in with it, too.
1,000%. And my support group will love that I gave them a shout out.
Oh, good.
It was started at McLaren. So I go to McLaren Greater Lansing, the Carmano Center, and the breast navigator, nurse navigator there had started it. After a few people were like, it would be really nice if we could connect with survivors to be able to talk about things that we're going through.
Right.
Different things with like menopause at such a young age, sex and intimacy, that all changes when you go through it. And so to have this group, and it started off with just breast, and then we opened it up to all cancer. So it's anyone that's premenopausal. And it's
right.
Yeah. So we meet every month, and it's so fun.
I love it. And what's the name of it?
It's just the Young Survivors Breast Cancer Support. We don't actually have a name.
Maybe I can help you with a catchy name.
Our group chat name is the Spice Girls.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Because we are all very
spicy.
open. We're very spicy. And everyone is so open and honest, and there's never a dull moment. And it's been good for me. I've loved it. I mean, I go every month. It's rare that I miss. There's a standard about 10 of us that are always there every month, and it's so great.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say that, our governor here in Michigan just declared November as Caregiving Month. And we focus a lot on family caregivers and what they give back to their loved ones as far as hope is concerned, keeping, the levity about the situation up. I know that was my big role with my mom. She was terminal when she got diagnosed, but we were able to keep her, for 8 months, which, she fought the battle, the good fight,
the hard
right?
fight.
Yes. And so I just think it's so cool that people are getting together, having these conversations, talking about the tough stuff, but also there's got to be some fun that you guys share as well, right?
Yeah.
Just the humor of going through what you're going through and just being like, I am 37 and I'm menopausal. This is awesome, right?
I mean, we are very much an open book.
Yeah.
Sometimes I worry when we have new people and it's like, ooh, yes, welcome to cancer.
Right. Well, I was cracking up because we did the little pre-conversation and I was like, Jacqueline, how comfortable are you? She's like, oh, I'm super comfortable. I didn't even finish the sentence. You're like, I'll talk about anything. So I'm like, you lead the convo and I will just follow. This has been amazing.
Yeah.
We're wrapping up. This was actually, already 17 minutes, which is impressive. But we could talk for days, it seems like.
1,000%.
Any final tips or information that you can share with our listeners today that you think is so important to move forward?
The big thing is if you feel something, say something.
Yep.
Making sure that you are checking yourself every month at least, and having that support group, whether it's friends, family, a support group, just making sure that you have that and keeping that positive outlook because, in the end, I think that's really what got me through it.
Absolutely.
And
well, we're so thankful that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations, if you can say that.
Yes.
I think it is a fight. You definitely went through it and, God bless you. I think it's great that, you're here and able to talk about the tough stuff. So thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you for having me.
And again, Jacqueline Williams, love here, our breast cancer survivors. So thanks for listening today. And remember, stay perfect.